Hi.
Hello there. By the way, if you hear some threatening noises, we're in the middle of a windstorm here. And the lights have flickered a few times, so if the lighting of the video changes,
It's
you
us,
know.
not you.
Not at your side, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Organization of the Christian congregation. Here we have 6 paragraphs, and these are so in need of unpacking that we probably have to break this section in half to do justice to it. A lot of things have to be discussed. So we'll read the 6 paragraphs and then try to deal with at least half of it in this video.
Did you say where we are? We're in Proclaimers?
We're in Proclaimers, page 28.
Okay.
From the time of Moses onward, the Jewish nation was in a unique position. It served as the congregation of God. That congregation was highly organized by God under older men, heads, judges, and officers. But the Jewish nation lost its privileged position because it rejected Jehovah's Son. On Pentecost of 33 CE, the Christian congregation of God replaced the congregation of Israel. How was this Christian congregation organized? Already, on the day of Pentecost, the disciples were devoting themselves to the teaching of the apostles, indicating that they began with a unity based on teaching. From that first day, they met together with one accord, and here they reference Acts 2:42 and verse 46. As the disciple-making work spread, congregations of believers began to form, first in Jerusalem and then outside Jerusalem. It was their custom to assemble together in public places as well as in private homes.
What kept the expanding Christian congregation from becoming a loose association of independent local churches?
Congregations, right?
Oh yeah, congregation. They wouldn't have used the word churches.
Nope.
They were united under one leader. From the beginning, Jesus Christ was the appointed Lord and head of the congregation, and he was recognized as such by all the congregations. From the heavens, Christ actively directed the affairs of his congregation on earth. How? By means of Holy Spirit and angels, put at his disposal by Jehovah. Christ had something else at his disposal for maintaining the unity of the Christian congregation, a visible governing body. At first, the governing body was made up of the faithful apostles of Jesus. Later, it included other older men of the Jerusalem congregation, as well as the Apostle Paul, even though he did not reside in Jerusalem. Each congregation recognized the authority of this central body of older men and looked to it for direction when organizational or doctrinal issues arose. With what result? Therefore, indeed, the congregation continued to be made firm in the faith and to increase in number from day to day. And they reference Acts 16.
The governing body, under the direction of Holy Spirit, supervised the appointment of overseers and assistants, ministerial servants, to care for each congregation. These were men who met spiritual qualifications that applied in all the congregations, not merely standards set locally. Overseers were urged to follow the scriptures and submit to the leading of Holy Spirit. All in the congregation were encouraged to be obedient to those taking the lead, and that's Hebrews 13, verse 17. In this way, unity was maintained, not only within each congregation, but within the Christian congregation as a whole.
Even though some men held positions of responsibility, there was no clergy-laity distinction among the first century Christian witnesses of Jehovah. They were all brothers. There was but one leader, the Christ. Why?
So let's start at the beginning. From the time of Moses onward, the Jewish nation was in a unique position. It served as the congregation of God. That congregation was highly organized by God. Now we need to say right away that the organization of Israel, such as it was actually organic. It was not organization like a corporation.
It was a family.
They've said it here. The Jewish nation.
Mm-hmm.
So what was already there even before the theocracy was built?
Well, when you think about in Egypt, when Moses goes back to Egypt, he calls the elders, the family heads, the community. They're already organized where they are.
Mm-hmm. And that's the case with all tribes, of course, and large numbers of people get organized. So when they say that congregation was highly organized by God, as if that's part of the theocratic arrangement, it wasn't. It was
it's a
the older
family.
men, heads, judges, all of that was more like democracy, i.e. these men would have risen from the
Patriarchy.
local clans. In the patriarchate, they would have risen from the bottom, not been appointed from the top.
Yeah. So family heads, the respected, the older family heads, really.
And in all of this, there's no governing body. The closest you get to it is when Moses' father-in-law in Exodus 18 actually says, Moses, you're taking too much on yourself. Appoint from among the elders, reach out among their gifts.
Work, yeah.
So that's completely different than the theocratic arrangement, which is actually more like Pharaoh and his court than it is like what was already existing in Israel, or even existed after, because you think of the priesthood as being the center of that organization, but we're the priesthood a governing body.
No, and they were set up by God. That was not something they did. That was something God did. And he didn't take the best qualified. He just took a family and said, this family are going to represent the priesthood. It was
exclusively.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you didn't qualify to be part of the Levitical priesthood. So that doesn't look theocratic either in the sense in which we understand it. And the model is less like a pyramid and more like a four axes, or if you like, picture a car with four wheels. And what are the four wheels? Well, the patriarchy that we're talking about, the local elders that already were there before Moses and Aaron, and then you've got the aristocracy, which grows later. That's not appointed by God at all. In fact, he opposes it.
That was their idea. The men, they wanted a king.
The king and princes, the family aristocracy, and then you've got the priesthood, which is divinely appointed. Right. But then you've got outside the box the prophets. They are the uncontrollable aspect of this from the standpoint of a pyramid power structure. They're not cooperating. They are directly appointed by God, and they're not from one tribe. Yeah,
they're individuals scattered, and he picks them and calls them, and they're usually in opposition to the others, because he's the prophet is the corrector.
Yeah. So what you've got is more like democratic or parliamentary democracy in the West than it is like theocracy, the pyramid power structure that the Watchtower thinks of as normal.
Yeah.
And then there's the second aspect of this, which is this claim at the end of that paragraph that on Pentecost of 33, the Christian congregation of God replaced the congregation of Israel. Yeah. And that is the untruth that led me, anyway, right out of the Watchtower. I saw that not only in the Old Testament, but even in the New, it's plainly predicted that Israel is not out of the plan of God.
Yeah.
They can't be replaced because they're the only theocratic nation. They're the only chosen nation or chosen people that God ever appointed.
Yeah, he's got a covenant with them. So I think it's not a statement in the Bible. They replace the Old Testament. You can throw it out now.
Nowhere.
Yeah, it doesn't say that. It's more like the Old Testament part, the ones that don't become Christians, they have truth, but they don't have the add-on of recognizing the Messiah.
That's right. Yeah. But that's related to what happens in the second paragraph here, when you have, Israel's out of the picture, but then in the last sentence of paragraph 2, it was their custom, that is the early Christians' custom, to assemble together in public places as well as in private homes.
Yeah, and I immediately thought, well, what public places?
And what's the answer?
How come they don't tell you that the public places are the temple and the synagogue? And they don't indicate that they continue to do this after Christ's death.
No. Do you see that when you're a witness?
No. That was kind of a surprise to me. Hey, yeah, they're still going to the synagogue. Even if you noticed it, I think you would think, oh, well, they're going to preach to them.
Yeah.
But their habit is to always go to the synagogue, every city they go to. And they're invited to speak. They don't take over the service.
So they don't need a new organization because they already have an organization, which is the Jewish system of worship, and they worship with those Jews. They don't just assemble with them.
Yeah.
They worship with them.
Yeah, so they haven't set up something else to replace. They're still part of that community. They're still joining with them in worship, and they're joining with them in hearing the word. Where do they hear the word?
Yeah. And this would happen several times a week. And they added on to that their house fellowships. So when they say they met together, they assembled together in public places as well as in private homes. And then all the references are basically about the add-on, which is the private homes. So you see that being the norm for the add-on to the Jewish order or the Jewish organization.
The family service, the family meal.
The only governing body we see in the New Testament is, of course, the Jewish governing body, the Sanhedrin, to which both Jesus and Paul and the other apostles are submit as the
show respect to. Yeah,
is the necessary adjunct to any local government, and even the Romans had admitted that they needed a Jewish administration. So the Christians participated in that way of ordering their Jewish community and society. And then in paragraph 3, you've got this. Oh boy. First sentence.
Did you not want to read first Ephesians 4? No?
Hang on for a sec, though, till we actually get into paragraph 3. What kept the expanding Christian congregation from becoming a loose association of independent local congregations? Well, there's a lie embedded in that question. Read it again. What kept the expanding Christian congregation from becoming a loose association of independent local congregations? What's the lie? It was a loose association of independent local congregations.
Yeah.
You can see that clearly as you leave the New Testament in Revelation 2 and 3.
Yeah. They make it sound like they're not just led by the Holy Spirit at different places, but that they're somehow reporting back to the governing body.
Yeah.
That just doesn't happen. They have a structure that unifies them. They continue to go to the synagogue and worship
with the Jews,
with their fellow believers, but the add-on of having arrangements at homes where they participate in remembering Christ's death and sing songs, and it tells you what they do. That's the add-on.
Then you've got this reference here to Ephesians 1:22, but there's no reference in this entire passage to Ephesians chapter 4, where we're told what the answer is to how it was that the Christians kept unity without a governing body.
Yeah, to have independent churches or congregations independent, and having that freedom, and yet still have unity.
Real spiritual unity, but not uniformity. So what does Ephesians 4, 1-7 have to say to this?
Okay. It reads, I therefore, the prisoner of the Lord, beseech you to walk worthy of the calling with which you were called, with all lowliness and gentleness, with long suffering, bearing with one another in love, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called in one hope of your calling. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is above all and through all and in all and in you all.
So what's the principle of unity in Christian congregations?
And 7, I should read.
Oh, okay.
But to each one of us grace was given according to the measure of Christ's gift.
So what is that principle of unity that will keep Christians unified despite the fact that they're locally autonomous?
The Spirit keeps them united.
Yeah, he doesn't say attain unity by outward order or by men's appointment. He says maintain the unity that's already there.
Yeah.
And what is that unity? Well, the important part of the unity, he says, is believing in one God, submitting to one Lord, and being unified by the Spirit which indwells all of you. And there's the secret as to why Jehovah's Witnesses need the organization and the governing body, because they don't have the indwelling of
Yeah.
the Holy Spirit.
They are called in one hope. So they all have the same hope, and they all have the indwelling Spirit.
And that makes them one body.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that when you get to the beginning of the 4th paragraph, they start with this: Christ had something else at his disposal. Christ had something else at his disposal for maintaining the unity of the Christian congregation, a visible governing body. So I would ask, why would you need a visible governing body if you have Christ, it says in the prior paragraph, directly directing the affairs of his congregation by means of Spirit and angels?
Yeah. Why do you need a visible governing body?
And that, of course, explains why there was no governing body in the 1st century. The only governing body they would have known about was the Sanhedrin.
But they have to set it up so that you believe that they are the visible governing body.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's so much to unpack, even in just this one subhead, that we're thinking we'll need to do
Yeah.
a second video on this section.
Specifically on the idea of submission to a governing body. That's the next 4 paragraphs. We'll link this to the difference between the organic model of God's theocracy in the Old Testament that begins with one man and expands organically into a family, extended family, clan, tribe, nation. The organic model of theocracy versus the organization model, which is more like modern corporation or like Pharaoh's court in Egypt than it is like the Old Testament model. So we'll put that organic versus organization video. There's several of them linked. That we'll put the first one up. And secondly, 7 characteristics of the early church. And one of the characteristics that jumps out at you right away if you really read Acts 2 and believe is that they were keeping up their organic connection to the Jewish unbelievers,
Yeah.
worshiping with people who were not believers in Messiah.
Yeah.
So those seven characteristics of the early church is the other link we'll put up on the screen.
See you next time.